How does Max Bemis make his coffee? He brews it. Hey guys, Tom here from Metalloud, and welcome to part 6 of the Say Anything review series. This time we're looking at, you guessed it, 2014's Hebrews. So Hebrews is probably the most interesting Say Anything album that they've ever put out, mostly due to the production and the writing and as far as what actually went into making this album happen. This was written over the course of Max Bemis' journey between Sherry's pregnancy and the birth of his first daughter. And it really shows on this album, which I'll get into a little bit more, but a lot of the interesting elements of this come from the production of this. When it was announced, and he announced that there were not going to be any guitar parts on this album, people kind of freaked out a little bit, because this is coming from Max Bemis of Say Anything, a band that's known for their guitar parts and the guitar work, and basically being one of the best bands within the indie rock genre, particularly with everything post Is a Real Boy. And people were wondering, how is this album going to work without any kind of guitar part to it whatsoever? This is also the first album with the departure of Kobe Linder, their original drummer, and without his influence on this album, people were kind of wondering, what is it going to sound like? What is it going to be? Especially after the kind of lackluster Anarchy My Dear, which again I felt like it was forced and probably shouldn't have been written in the first place. And Hebrews came out, and it was just something that was completely different from Say Anything, and yet familiar all the same. Especially with the music itself, a lot of it was back to the chaotic and neurotic sounds that people loved about Is a Real Boy and things like that. And the actual songwriting was much stronger than Anarchy My Dear. While there are some songs on here where they kind of fall apart towards the chorus, and it gets a little bit back into that rhyming scheme that I did not like about Anarchy My Dear, and parts of their self-titled where I felt it was a bit too simplistic and a bit too regressive. And I really feel that they kind of stepped things up with this album. There's songs like 666 where, again, that rhyming scheme is kind of a bit childish and again simplistic, that I don't like so much, but the rest of the song is so strong that it really kind of overcomes that, which is something that's great. And most of these tracks honestly don't really feel like they're missing anything because of the lack of guitar. A lot of the string elements on here are stuff we really would not expect from Say Anything, and from this type of music. You get harps, violins, mandolins, just things that are really out of the ordinary and keep things interesting. This album is also very heavy with the synth work, and it may come off as a bit, again, simplistic in the synth work, but it really kind of harkens back to the original days of Say Anything, which to me it's definitely keeps it interesting, because it really reminds you of where they kind of started out. And if you listen to anything pre Is a Real Boy, it's very synth heavy, it's very kind of rough, it's not so much as guitar driven as their albums progressed further. And I think this is kind of a regression back to that, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. He does very good work within that realm of just synths and drums and things like that. And again, the string elements on here are definitely non-traditional, which again keeps things kind of fresh and alive. And as I mentioned, one of the better things about this is that it was written during the pregnancy and the birth of his first daughter. And I think that a lot of the things I had against Anarchy My Dear, where the angst and the self-loathing and things like that kind of really felt forced and didn't really feel like they were coming from a real place, a genuine place. Here on this album, they really do, and I think that's because of what he was going through at that time. And you really get this sense of fear from Max Bemis of becoming a deadbeat parent, and his family leaving him, and him just basically being a washed up former rock star. And there's songs here like the song My Greatest Fear is a Splendid Thing, featuring Keith Buckley of Every Time I Die, where he's talking about his fears for the future and what's going to happen. And there's songs on here where he's talking about how he's, criticized his parents for doing their job, and now he's about to become a parent, and basically he's so scared of what it means to actually do that. There are songs talking about what he would say to basically fears about boys and his daughter in the future. There's a lot of on here that comes from a absolute honest place, I feel, for Max Bemis, which is something that was kind of lacking in Anarchy My Dear. He at that time, again, he was at a very good place. There wasn't really anything to draw from because he was happy, he was married, he was doing very well, he was sober, and or at least he was off drugs. And here, he has a real kind of dark place to go to and to actually draw from, and I think that's something that we all kind of connect it to. And it's unfortunate because a lot of people feel that he doesn't have anywhere else to go, and that's why they keep talking about they hope he goes back on drugs and things like that to go back to the style of his A Real Boy, and they feel that that's the only reason that album was the way it was. And he actually even addresses that in this album with a track called Judas Decapitation, which is kind of a fuck you to those people who refuse to move on from that album, who are saying things like they wish he'd go back on drugs, like they wish his family would leave him, and just awful, horrible things that people actually do say about his albums. And just so they hope that they can hear Is a Real Boy again, and just they can't move past that album and accept something different from the band. And I think that's a great track that really kind of deals with that, and you get a sense of what he's going through when he hears stuff like that. The other thing on this album that's kind of a double-edged sword is the guest vocal work on here. And I say that because while the guest work itself is varied and very well done from the talent, like Keith Buckley of Every Time I Die, and Tom DeLonge of Blink-180, well, formerly of Blink-182, and Aaron Weiss of Me Without You, their parts are generally not as well written as they could have been. They're not as utilized well enough. And I feel like that's kind of a downside. While it's great to see them on these tracks, and they do a great job with what they're given, I feel like what they're given isn't so much integrated well into the songs themselves. Aaron Weiss probably is the only one who really has a cohesive part in the song Push, where he has this spoken word part at the end of the song, and it feels like it was written for him, and it's very well done, versus for instance, Brian Sella on the song Hebrews, where it really just feels like it was tacked on. It doesn't really feel like it was written for Brian Sella, and it doesn't really feel like it was written into the song as well as it could have been. Tom DeLonge kind of is only in the beginning of the song Nibble Nibble, which is probably one of my favorite tracks on the album. It starts off kind of very poppy and then breaks into what could be mistaken as guitar work, and it feels like actually feels like something reminiscent of Is a Real Boy era. And I think it's a song that probably a lot of people would enjoy off of this album, but he's kind of only available in the beginning of the song, and then he's pushed to the way background as the song progresses. So I don't feel like the guest vocal work was used as well as it actually could have been on this album. So while it's great to see them on there, it's not, say, In Defense of the Genre, where the actual guest vocal work was very, very well done and integrated into the songs in a very cohesive manner. And that's something that really isn't done here. But again, it's still interesting and nice to see the other vocalists on this album. So basically, if you were expecting to hear Is a Real Boy again, you're going to be disappointed with Hebrews. But if you can definitely open your ears up and your mind up to something different, you're going to have a lot to like on this album. It's varied, it's interesting, it's easy to connect to, it's emotional. and it rocks hard. It's pretty awesome as far as a song to listen, album to listen to. I enjoy it definitely way better than Anarchy, My Dear, and honestly, it has some of my favorite tracks that Say Anything has ever done. I just feel that people again need to kind of move past the it doesn't sound like Is a Real Boy and get over the it doesn't have any guitar parts, and I think they'll enjoy this album as well. Thank you so much for watching part 6 of the Say Anything review series. If you like what you saw, hit that like button. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to the channel, as well as follow me on social media, on Twitter at Metalloud, Instagram Metal_Loud, and Facebook Metalloud. There is a Facebook page you can like and keep up to date.